I am a big admirer of the creative process. And when somebody does something creatively, that really grabs my attention, especially when they seem to be doing it really, really well. And my guest today is somebody who has that in spades. They're creative in their parenting approach. She's very creative with her business. And it's just really neat to see how she is raising her children with all these creative processes and working in an at-home business as well. And I got to tell you, recently, when I saw the pictures of it on Facebook and I was just really impressed with the creativity, that made my day. And welcome back once again to my podcast, That Made My Day. My name is Greg Fish, and That Made My Day is a Corbin Cast Network podcast. And we're here to encourage you to overcome obstacles and get stronger and better. And I'm going to lose those glasses so I can actually read something here. Please like us and share us on social media because we'd love it if you subscribed or followed us. It's absolutely free. And when you like us or share us on social media, it helps us to get the word out to others. You can also find out more about us at www.corbinfostermedia.com. That's corbinfostermedia.com. Love to have you check us out. Well, hi there. Welcome along. Today we're going to look at parenting, but really it's a podcast for everyone. It's about the creative process. It's about doing things that speak into the heart of, I want to say future generations, but it's generations that are among us now. And my guest today here in the studio with me is Emily Kemp. And Emily, welcome into That Made My Day. You are only guest number 2 on this podcast, so it's quite an auspicious place for you to be in. And thank you for coming along today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I want you to tell me, first of all, let's just start the whole thing by telling me a little bit about your nice, beautiful little family. Okay. Introduce us to them.
All right. So I am married to my husband, Jeremy, and we met when we were 11 years old.
Oh, my.
Yes. We were each other's first boyfriend and girlfriend when we were 12 and stayed best friends. And then we've been married. It'll be 7 years on August 1st. And then we have 2 little ones. We have Kylie, who just turned 5, and we have Killian, who will be 3 next week.
Now, how many years total then have you been with Jeremy?
I have no idea. Oh gosh, 7 years married, and we got married when we were 21.
Okay. Oh wow.
I guess started when we were 12. So whatever the math there is.
So roughly that many years.
Most of our life.
Almost 2 days. Yeah. You probably can't remember a life without him much, can you?
No.
All right. Awesome. So tell me a little bit then about this project, the Kemp Nest. How did the idea of the Kemp Nest come about, and what exactly does that mean?
So the Kemp Nest is my little small business that I started during COVID.
Uh-huh.
And it was something that's probably been many, many years in the making. I've always been really creative and crafty. Even when I was young, that was like my go-to gift for family. I always wanted to make something rather than buy it.
Nice.
And as I got older, I kind of lost the time to do those crafty, creative things. I got my degree in special education from Illinois State, and
Nice.
I taught for 3 years in the public schools until I had Killian and started to stay home with him. And so between balancing motherhood and being a new teacher and just, being a wife and having a home, there was no time to sit down and scrapbook or, make a craft.
Mm-hmm.
And I really missed that. And so I took the opportunity once I did become a stay-at-home mom to kind of dive into that a little bit more and expand my creativeness to woodwork and some things that I hadn't tried before. And really when quarantine hit, it was my lifesaver. I put so much time into my family and trying to make sure they were happy and they were okay and that my kids were understanding what was going on as much as possible. And that was kind of my nightly thing that I could do for myself. I could try something new and get back into that creativeness. And I found that the more I did, the better I got, and the more I shared what I was making. And as people were able to come visit, as quarantine kind of ended, they were seeing the things that I was putting in my house, and they were asking, could I make something for them, or could I make something for a Christmas gift for a family member? And it kind of just took hold there, and I had been looking for something different to do with life on the extra time and make just a little bit extra money on the side for the family. And it just blossomed really quickly by the spring. And so the name, the Kemp Nest, obviously my last name is Kemp, but we always kind of, considered our house a nest. It was a place to raise our family and, keep them safe and care for them. But it was also somewhere, if you imagine, birds carefully weaving their nests together and really taking a lot of time and energy and putting that into their home. That's kind of what we always thought about with our home. We were big on home projects and just redecorating and making it the perfect place for us. And so in my business, that's what I want to do for other people. I want to give them this option where they don't have to just go to a big box store and try and find things to fit into their house. They can come to me and I can personalize it and customize it and make it exactly what they need for their home.
And I want to come back to the Kemp Nest in just a few moments, but first let me ask you this, because what you've had to do is create something while juggling motherhood, but you've also made another decision in your life, and that is as important as your career was, as much as you studied and prepared for your career, there came a point in time when you realized that you wanted to, at least for a time in your life, to shift that priority to your kids. So tell me, how did you, did your career prepare you for what you were about to do, what you were about to embark on with your kids? How did that all come together?
You would think that being a teacher would prepare you more for having kids. And I really think it prepared me a lot for, like we're talking about, the creative side of things and preparing for educating them. But it never prepared me for what I've experienced in the last, year and a half. And I mean, none of us were ready for what we experienced. But, it gave me a good way of being able to step back and look at things more clinically. I think sometimes when you are in the moment of parenthood, even if you know nature of children and this is why they're acting like this, especially, like I said, with my background in special ed, I know a lot about behavior and how to figure out why it's happening, what they're going to do to react, and then what I should do in response to help that. That kind of goes out the door when you have little ones and you've been doing it all day long, you're kind of over it. And so it definitely, at least in that area, it gave me the chance to breathe through what was happening with my kids, step back, give both of us a moment, and then come back and know for sure what I should do from there. But yeah, so definitely with the behaviors of it, and then the structuring our day, it really came in handy a lot during quarantine when we weren't sure what life was going to be like and for how long it was going to be like that. Being able to figure out I knew what my kids needed and be creative about that.
And I was just thinking too, I mean, of course you had known your husband all the way through your junior high years, but being now the mother of a little boy, were you prepared for just how many times a guy could say the word poop or butt in one sentence? Or, I mean, that has to be a big learning blast for you, right?
It definitely is. Now, I was a middle school teacher, so I am used to the poop and the toots and all of that. But again, it's very different when you have those kids 7 or 8 hours a day and then you get to leave and they go somewhere else. Right. It's very different when you are with them all day long, morning to night, the same jokes, the same, and he's a roughhouser, the same, punching and kicking and those kinds of things. So yeah, it was a big learning curve from my original princess going to my prince.
And by the way, I got to tell you, Emily's kids are just the two sweetest little kids. And the boy, even though he is a roughhouser and he loves words like we mentioned earlier, he had the greatest smile and is just the most loving little fellow. And they're both very loving kids. But so the pandemic. Tell me, what did the pandemic do to you as a parent, and what have you seen it do to your kids that is different?
My biggest moment of quarantine, I guess, and the COVID pandemic as a whole, I felt like I was holding it all together until the Christmas season. And now holding it together doesn't mean I was doing it right, but I was making it through. I felt like, okay, my kids are still learning. They're still making progress. And we got to about Christmas time, and I was trying to schedule so many things for them to get out and do. And Jeremy, my husband's kind of like, do we have to? Like, can't we just sit for a day,
Uh-huh.
And I came to this realization that whether I knew it or not at the time, I was trying to do everything that a village was doing. They always say it takes a village to raise a kid. And even if you're kind of, maybe a more stay-at-home family or you don't have family around you, even then you don't realize what that village is doing on the outside. Even just taking your kid to the park and allowing them to socialize with other kids is such a great lesson that you can't just teach at home. And so by the time we got to Christmas, having both kids out of activities and events and preschool and everything, I was it. If they didn't get their Christmas spirit from me, they weren't getting it at church because church was closed. They weren't getting it from going to a special Santa Claus event, seeing Santa Claus. They didn't get any of that. So it might seem kind of silly, but like I was in charge of the Santa Claus Christmas spirit, teaching them about the Lord Jesus, and also trying to incorporate family when we weren't able to see all of our family yet.
Right.
And so I really think that was the biggest thing for me, though. The whole time, like I said, whether I realized it or not, I was wearing so many hats that even though I thought before the pandemic I was wearing a lot of hats as a mom and a teacher and everything, I had even more when I'm talking about socializing my kids. And my son Killian has a speech delay. And so suddenly I'm also the one in charge of watching the videos with his speech therapist and then trying to implement that all day long when I have no other kids except for my daughter to practice that with and help him socialize. So yeah, the pandemic was the hardest for us, like I said, when we had to do everything and we had nowhere else to turn anymore.
And so during the pandemic, even though your kids are preschool age yet, you really did step into that role like so many parents of not just being mom, but being teacher as well. And did that create extra stress for you? And if so, how did you deal with that?
Well, it definitely creates extra stress, but I think there's a mom mode, I would call it. And that's what I was stuck in for a while. It was just, what do we need to do? How do we need to get through this? How do I explain it to my kids? How do I teach them about it while I'm also trying to teach them about everything else in the world? And I don't know, at a certain point, like I said, it was just too overwhelming around that Christmas time. And I realized I had not only been wearing all those hats the whole time, but I was making myself continue to wear those hats. We did reach a point when the pandemic, did kind of shift and there was more opportunities for finding outside things to do. And so that was kind of what got me through it, was being able to take a leap. I know not everybody was ready for that, not ready to take their kids out, and some people still aren't ready, to take their kids out.
Right.
But kind of taking that chance and branching out in ways that I felt were still safe. Some of that was taking them outside. Some of that was really researching virtual events. There's still a lot of good virtual events going on that you can find, especially through Facebook. And they might not be the most interactive with the kids, but it gave us a lot of things that we could still talk about or carry on. So that doesn't so much have to do with me dealing with my stress, but my stress was coming from, feeling like I had to do it all for the kids the entire time, even when there was more opportunities popping up.
And if I know anything about your kids as well, I think Kylie's definitely more of the socializer, I would think, isn't she? Probably kind of like her mom, maybe gets that from you.
Yes.
And how did she cope? I mean, she's just learning to be social and to go out and do things. And now I'm sure she doesn't understand why, but she has to stay at home all the time. What was that like? What did you see happen in Kylie?
It was devastating for Kylie. I remember her last real day of preschool was Wacky Wednesday.
Okay.
And she got to go and dress up, like the book, wearing crazy things, and we have pictures from it. And then I think maybe she had one more day after that. It was kind of a fun day. And then we were done, and we never went back. And the hardest thing for her, besides, of course, the not being able to see friends, but was the unexpectedness of when it was going to end. Because we couldn't give her a date. We couldn't tell her when, and the school didn't know when. The preschool kept changing It was going to be, okay, we're going to be closed for this month. And then it was going to be, okay, we'll open up for May. And then they still didn't open up in fall. And so it was just so many letdowns for her.
Right.
And she just, even if we talk about germs and we talk about the masks and things, it still doesn't sit well with a 4-year-old to completely understand what we were going through. There was a lot of tears and a lot of, I remember her looking through the window. We live right next to a park, and they had completely blocked off the entire park for the summer. And I remember her just staring out the window crying, not because she couldn't play at the park, but because it meant so much to her to be able to go and meet other kids there and just, walk across our yard and hang out with somebody when she's lonely. Like you said, she is the socializer. She loves to talk to people. And we went through such a time where it was kind of a rude thing almost at some places to talk to somebody else. They didn't want you near them.
Right.
And she didn't understand that. And she didn't understand why even some stores I couldn't take her in. I had to leave her at home, which even just isolated her more and more. So it was definitely a huge hit for her.
And I know, too, another aspect is you guys are a military family, your husband being involved with the military. Did that create any special challenges in the processes of this past year?
It was actually kind of a positive thing in that regards. The military, the armory he works at did shut down for a while, so he was able to be home, which he might not have loved. But I was kind of happy about it, at least for a while. So we actually got to see him a little bit more than we usually do.
Nice.
And during the pandemic, the trips that he normally goes on in the trainings, those were also closed for a long time. And so it was nice to kind of have him at home for, the times that he would normally be gone for 2 to 4 weeks. We made up for that this year. He's already been gone for a long time this year.
Wow.
But yeah, for the time being, it was okay.
Now, one of the things that I got to be a part of because of my connection with your family that really spoke to my heart was Kylie had been looking forward to, and you can explain this more, to the reading thing, and tell us about what she missed out on and what your response to that was, because it was such a cool idea.
So Kylie's preschool, they do a start of the week kind of thing, and they get special things that they get to do throughout the week, and then the last day of preschool, they get to have a special reader come in, and she was going to have my husband, her dad, come in. He was going to take a day off of work and surprise her. They don't know who's going to come in.
Gotcha.
So he was going to come in, surprise her, and read this book to her class. And of course, that was the next week after we were shut down. And we just kept waiting and waiting, hoping we were going to go back. We finished her poster and everything. And of course, we never went back. And so I knew how badly she wanted it, and we weren't sure that there was going to be any opportunity for a real birthday party or anything. She has a summer birthday. And so we decided to do what we called the book crawl. And we had family and friends sign up to allow us to come visit them on this certain day. And we went house to house and just met them outside where it was safe. We brought our lawn chairs and sat outside at most people's. And we either allowed them to choose a book, or we brought some of Kylie's books and she got to choose it, and she shared her poster at every house.
Nice.
And then everybody got to be a special reader then, not just my husband. And yeah, we went house to house. We traveled everywhere. It was a full day event. We live in Germantown, and we hit Germantown, Washington, Bloomington, Hudson. We went just about everywhere, and she was exhausted by the end of the day, mind you. But she was so happy. She loves attention, and which probably goes along with that socializing thing. She likes, being able to tell people about herself. And so it was wonderful for her.
Now, I want to ask you about some of the things you're doing with your kids, but first, you use social media quite a bit, especially with pictures, and I'm assuming you share them within your friend group largely, but what is your philosophy on sharing what your family does on social media?
I understand that there are a lot of parents that feel both ways on the issue. There are definitely a lot of people, I think especially my age, those of us with young kids who worry about the imprint of having photos out there and descriptions of your kids that they have no choice in. It's something that's going to be there forever, and I completely understand that. I am more on the side where I know that social media for a lot of families can be one of the only ways that I think moms, especially who stay at home, or dads who stay at home, one of the only ways that they get to see other people. We don't have coworkers. Our coworkers are the other moms on Facebook. And so I feel strongly that I want to share information and photos and videos of my family that are real, but also positive. I don't want anybody to ever look at my social media and feel like we are perfect.
Sure.
And that nothing ever goes wrong. But I also don't ever want to share something that I think my kids would find embarrassing in 10 years. I try and keep it in the middle ground, but I want to see, or I want other people to see what we're doing, because I didn't realize how many things were out there for kids. I had to put in a lot of research to find things, and I've come across, some different websites and things, and that's a lot of the questions I get when somebody sees something that I've gone and done, or my family's gone and done. They'll ask me, well, where is this? Sometimes I even get, more detailed questions. How can I find out about classes here? What are the prices? And I love sharing things like that with them, because then that gives them more opportunities to go do that. And even if it's not something that, we signed up for, some of the activities we do at home, I want other people to see what we've been able to find and how easy it was to do it, rather than if you go, there's tons of wonderful information out there on Teachers Pay Teachers or on Pinterest. But sometimes that can be overwhelming. I find that sometimes it's nice if you just see my Facebook story, something simple we did that was educational and easy to put together, and then you can go do it the same day, and it's not so overwhelming as researching it yourself.
By the way, I think that's so good what you said about considering what your kids would be embarrassed by in 10 years, because I think sometimes we as parents, guilty, can get some enjoyment out of embarrassing our kids. And wow, that is great. That is so important. I am so glad you said that. What a great point. Now, talk a little bit about some of these things I've seen you do with your kids. Tell us a little bit about some of the activities that you've done with them that have been what you would consider to be the most successful, and maybe about the genesis of those ideas.
Well, I'll start with the most unsuccessful ideas, if that's okay, because
Sure.
It's been quite a transition. I would say my original ideas that I was doing with my kids, it's not that they were bad. They were educational, and they were something that most of the time my kids enjoyed. But I found that I was spending just as much time teaching them as I was setting up for those activities. Now, that is directly related to probably what I did as a teacher. I spent an awful lot of time trying to come up with creative ideas to engage my students. And because I was in special education, there was a lot of things that I had to alter between each student to meet their levels and their needs. I don't necessarily need to do that at home, and I didn't click in with that originally. And so if you peered into my window in my first few months of teaching them, I was exhausted and frustrated when I spent so much time trying to find these ideas and then cutting out everything perfectly and having it laid out for them. And then they spent, 5 minutes on it, and they weren't excited about it tomorrow. So what we do more now, although we do have a lot of, fun new activities that I like to throw in there, I obsess over whatever they are obsessed with at the moment. So if I find something that they are really interested in, then I go with that like it is gold. So one example would be my kids love it when I put yarn across the living room.
Really?
I don't know if you've ever seen that photo. But I will basically make a spider web with yarn all across the living room and weave it in and out. And what I do is, well, I've done a couple of things, but sometimes I will hide things inside of the web, and you have to kind of go through the web trying not to touch it to find those things. Now, the great thing about activities like that is that you can change that to be whatever you want to work on. I could hide shapes from a puzzle. I could hide numbers. I could hide different colors, depending on which kid I'm working with. And then they can go through, they can find those, and they try and collect them all and bring them back. And the fun part is just that they don't touch the web. There's nothing really educational about that, but it's whatever I want to change it to, and they love it. So I'm going to do it, maybe not every day, but, once a week, try and throw that in there. So something like that has been really good for us. Sensory bins and things that you can have the kids dig in. I made one of my first Kemp Nest items was kind of a sensory bin. And so each of them get their own bins, and we can put sand in it, we can put water in it, we've made snow, and you can put that in there, and then just hiding things in there and then pulling them out. And that's a really great one for if you're doing animals or seashells, something with science, talking about the different textures or the different shapes, which is bigger, which is smaller. And so I wish I had like one great creative activity to tell you, but really the creativity is much more successful when you find something that they're already interested in, and then you just manipulate it every day, or every few days to try and keep them intrigued by it, because eventually, even if you have the greatest activity, they're going to get bored with it because they're getting older and they're changing. And so just trying to treat it like gold is probably the best thing that I found for myself. I stay sane. I don't have to spend as much time preparing for it. I just kind of have to think through how am I going to change it up today so that they'll still be excited by it. And the best thing is that is what they spend an hour on, not the thing that I spent an hour on preparing.
Gotcha.
But the thing that they're already excited about just seems to work much better.
So what I hear you saying then is keep it simple and look for what they're engaging with. Find those things. Did you have a source for these ideas, or are you just an endlessly creative person when it comes to these ideas?
Sensory bins are pretty common in schools, either in the younger grades or special education, depending on the needs of the kids that you have. So that's something that's been around for a while. But you can definitely find different ideas on how to change up those sensory bins on Pinterest, especially. That's a good one. Then the yarn actually came from I was in a sorority, and that is how we found our big sisters. After we were accepted. You put yarn at one end, and then they went around the whole house, and it was all intertwined, and you had to go through to find your big sister. So I've tried to pull from things that I remember having fun with when I was younger, whether it be college or before. I think the things that I remember the most from growing up are because they were the most engaging and the most creative. And so I try to kind of hold on to those things and figure out how I can apply it in our life too.
Now I want to come back to the Kemp Nest for a few moments because our time is running short here. But first of all, we'll leave in the show notes information for how people can check out the Kemp Nest and engage with you on your products if you'd like. Tell us briefly what you have found to be, because you have to weave together creating products and marketing products. So have you started to get a feel for what some of the most successful routes of marketing are for a small business mother in your position?
That is actually something that I am trying to figure out the most right now. I have found that since I started the business, and it's just been March, it feels like it's been much longer, but it's really just been March. But I've found that I am struggling so much more than I anticipated with trying to, again, juggle all those hats. Being the one that comes up with the ideas, takes in orders, has to do all the recording and figuring out the pricing, going and picking up the things, and then, creating it and delivering it. I have found that one of the best things that I've done for myself right now is trying to find different shops that I can put my items in. I don't have to have a huge inventory or anything, but being able to put that out there with my business card has been one of the best things I have done for myself, because it takes out a middleman. They then can do some of the, the booking and the keeping track of things, and that brings the people directly to me. So that's been something really helpful. I also have a Facebook page, and that has been also really helpful because, one, it's free. And if it's not going great for you, you always have the chance to pull back on that. But they also offer the option that you can pay to run ads and boost ads. And I feel like it's really nice to have that page that I can then share. Again, it's free in local groups, because that's mainly what I'm targeting is people, close around here who are looking for those customized things.
Gotcha.
So both of those things together are working pretty well right now. I'm always looking for other ideas, but that's
Are you selling through Facebook?
I do. I have not tried, there's Marketplace and things like that.
Right.
I have not really tried that too much. I have listed maybe one or two things on there, and I find that the items that I'm creating with being personalized and customized, there's not too many people that are looking on Marketplace for those kinds of things that are not looking for it to be shipped. So that might be something
Gotcha.
that I'm geared towards next. But right now, trying to find the balance between what materials I'm purchasing and the items that I'm making, and trying to keep the prices, down for people, especially with wood prices being so high right now.
Sure.
I have been trying to figure out the best free ways to market myself.
And then as far as word of mouth, I'm guessing is probably going to be big for somebody in your position.
Yes, I would say that's probably honestly been the best, between the sharing of the Facebook photos and pages on my personal page, and then just word of mouth from my wonderful friends and family who do that for me. Together, those have been the best.
Well, and of course, this podcast is new, so we're still discovering our viewers, but maybe we'll send just a flood of new business your way once they check you out online as well. And we'll be sure, again, include all that in the show notes and here on the screen as well as some of the pictures. So if you want to follow up and see some of these things or ask Emily about those, I'm sure there will be a way that they can somehow get a hold of you maybe?
Yes.
Okay, we'll make sure that everybody has that information. Well, Emily, this has been really intriguing, and this time has gone by much more quickly than I expected, but I have so many more questions, but let's just kind of leave it at there today, just to say, of course, give big hugs to your kids for me, and thank you so much for coming on. Any last words? And let me wrap it up this way as well. As people of faith, as people who approach these things from a position of faith, how has your faith in Christ influenced the processes that we've been talking about?
I feel like we have had to fall back on our faith. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but
that makes sense.
But rely on it a lot more than we ever did before in our parenting. When we had Kylie, we were not expecting it. I had just been teaching for a year, and Jeremy was a soldier but had not yet found a full-time position. And when we found out we were pregnant, we had no idea how we were going to make that work. And we struggled and researched and tried to figure it out, and it just wasn't the timing God had in mind. And he provided everything that we needed by the time that Kylie came. And so I feel like because he gave us that early on in our marriage and our parenting journey, that's something we've always been able to trust, because we trusted him then, and it works out wonderfully. And so every time we kind of get to a point where, and especially me, because I am a researcher, when I get to the point where I have just researched to the ends of the earth and I cannot find the answer and I cannot figure it out for my family, it brings me back to that point, and it reminds me that sometimes you just have to rely on God and send up that prayer and trust that he is going to make it work. And whether that, I sent plenty of prayers during the pandemic, but
Sure.
even just before that, with things that my kids were struggling, like Killian's speech, or with my daughter, and some just general behaviors in hindsight. I now know that they were just, growing pains. But at the time, it feels so much bigger than that. And I remember, sending up so many prayers about it, and they have not all been what I would say fixed, but the progression, despite what we've been going through the last year, it has to be God. There is nothing that I could have done to make those changes on my own. And so I think that has been the biggest thing, is just knowing that you can Pinterest and you can look it all up, and you will find answers galore. But at some point, you might just have to step back and realize that you need to let God in instead.
Kind of take a deep breath and a holy pause, as I like to say. Yeah.
Yes.
And of course, you guys are surrounded by beautiful family. You have a wonderful family, wonderful people in it, and I'm sure that's a big help to you along the way as well. But all these things just come together. Well, Emily, thank you so much for coming and being a part of our That Made My Day podcast today, and such a privilege to have you here with us. And again, if you'd like to know more, we'll include things in the show notes, include some links for you there. In the meantime, we'd like to encourage you, if you are looking for ways to overcome obstacles and get stronger and better, stay with us, because we're going to continue to present to you programs that are born out of things that made my day, and will help you to do that. So please, again, like us and share us on social media. You can imagine how helpful that is. If you see us on YouTube and can subscribe to the channel, it's free. You don't have to pay for that, but that also helps us out in ways that you may not even realize. And check us out, of course, at www.corbinfostermedia.com. And that does it for another edition of That Made My Day. I'm Greg Fish. We are a Corbin Cast Network podcast. And it has been so good to have you with us. Thank you so much for coming along today for the podcast.